All right, good morning, everybody. Glad to see your faces again. I was telling earlier to most of the folks here, but yeah, we as a council, we decided with all the other leaders on the church that this is a time to bring it back down again with the rise in COVID numbers, and so this is maybe actually a little bit better situation for us for the adult learning sessions, is that because of the sound issues we have with when someone in the on site at the church says something, folks online have a hard time hearing. But now we all are be able to hear each other. So there's always a silver lining somewhere. So let me share my screen. Yeah, so like I said, good morning. This is our second session for climate justice, care for God's creation. And so I sent you guys past week, some information about kind of what we're going to be talking about today. Last week, we dived into climate change, climate justice, and came from different angles. And now we're trying to a little bit control that topic of discussion. So we're going to talk about climate change is a poverty issue. So, keep in mind on that, on those thoughts. I mean, we can still talk about other things. I'm not going to let you not talk about other things, but let's focus on this information that's being presented today. And today's Bible scripture is from Deuteronomy 15, chapter 15, verses 10 through 11. Give liberally, and be ungrudging when you do so. For this account, the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and all that you undertake. Since there will never cease to be some in need on the earth, I therefore command you, open your hand to the poor and needy neighbor in your land. All right, so we'll start with the first video presentation. Today we'll have also 3 videos like we did last weekend, last session, but let me change my screen.
How is climate change affecting the developing world where organisations like Tear Fund work?
The reason why we care about a changing climate is not because a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 degree increase in the average temperature of the entire planet really matters that much to any one of us. It's because that temperature increase, like the first domino in a row of dominoes, kicks off a series of interconnected impacts and events that affect all of us around the world, but affect the poorest and most vulnerable more than any. The single best description I've heard of climate change was coined by the US military, if you can believe it, and it's this: climate change is a threat multiplier. In other words, it takes all of the other issues that we already care about, all of the issues, for example, that are exemplified by the Sustainable Development Goals, issues of poverty, hunger, lack of education, basic healthcare resources. It takes these issues and it makes them worse. Another way to think about it is with this image of a bucket with a hole in it. We're pouring all of our efforts into this bucket to alleviate poverty, hunger, disease, lack of access to clean water, refugee crises, and more. Yet that bucket has a hole, and the hole is getting bigger and bigger over time, and there is no way to fill the bucket if we do not patch the hole. The hole is climate change. I care about climate change specifically because it does affect the poorest and most vulnerable in the world. It's no accident that there is a direct correlation between people who are already living in poverty and people who are most vulnerable. Because how climate change affects us is by loading the weather dice against us. In the places where we live, we know that we've always had heavy rainfall, floods, heat waves, hurricanes, droughts, storms, wildfire, and more. These are a normal and natural part of life on this planet. But the warmer it gets, the more frequent or the stronger and more damaging these events are getting. We know that the frequency of heavy precipitation is increasing. We know that heat waves are getting more extreme. We know that droughts are getting stronger. We know that wildfires are burning greater area. We know that cyclones, hurricanes, or typhoons, all the same storm, they're just called different names in different parts of the world. We know that they're not getting more frequent, but they're getting much bigger, stronger, slower, more powerful, with a lot more rainfall associated with them. And then there's the long-term changes, like creeping sea level, with 2/3 of the world's biggest cities, many of those in developing countries, lying within just a meter of sea level. So why does climate change matter? It matters precisely because it disproportionately affects the poorest and most vulnerable in the world. If we have a flood in a rich country, it can be devastating. It can produce very expensive damages. But if they have a flood in a developing country, as occurred, for example, 2.5 years ago in Bangladesh during the monsoon season, where due to the abnormally heavy rains, 1/3 of the entire country was underwater, the impacts can be beyond belief. Where I live in Texas, we experienced a massive record-breaking drought in 2011 and 2012. Where we live is, climatologically speaking, very similar to Syria. And in Syria, they also experienced a drought that's estimated to be 2 to 3 times more likely as a result of a changing climate. But that drought was occurring on top of an unstable political system, on top of poverty, on top of ongoing conflict, a pre-existing internal refugee crisis, all of which led climate change and its impact on the drought to be like the final straw on the camel's back. You can have a healthy camel that doesn't have much on it, it can absorb that extra straw. But if you have a camel that is malnourished, underfed, in poor health, already overloaded, that's when climate change can truly be the final straw that breaks the camel's back. Another example, and this is the exact same event this time, was Hurricane Matthew. Hurricane Matthew hit the Carolinas in the United States in October 2016. It produced billions of dollars worth of damage, and it led to the loss of 28 lives. Now, those are very serious impacts, but before it hit the coast of the United States, it hit Haiti, which is the poorest country in all of Central and North America. In Haiti, the headlines look like this: we've lost everything. In Haiti, they already had cholera, and the epic flooding that resulted from the hurricane exacerbated the cholera epidemic. In some places, up to 90% of people lost their homes. All across the world, since the 1960s, it's estimated that the economic gap between the richest and poorest countries has already increased by 25% due to the impacts of a changing climate. And this past year, the United Nations warned that climate change threatens to undo the last 50 years of development, global health, and poverty reduction. We care about climate change because it is a threat multiplier. Climate change is not only an environmental issue, climate change is a poverty issue, it's a hunger issue, it's an issue of inequality and injustice. Climate change is a human issue, and that's why we care.
All right, so that was our first video. Climate change is a poverty issue. So let me let everyone hear the first discussion question, then I'll put it back into a gallery mode. So Dr. Katharine Hayhoe compares climate change to a hole in a bucket. If we don't patch that hole, then the money we spend on other great needs, such as education or farming, will not take people out of poverty. So what are your thoughts on, the example of that a leaking bucket, that it seems like it's getting more and more holes in it? And go ahead and unmute yourself if you want to speak.
Tim does.
Oh, Mark, you have some, go ahead, or unmute yourself.
I'm on. There I go. I got it.
Yep.
So as I was thinking about this, it occurred to me that maybe the problem with the bucket may not be that it's got holes in it. Maybe it's got too tight of a lid on it. Because I think we know what the solutions are, or we have a good idea of things that we should be doing, but we are blocked from making those meaningful changes by a variety of influences. And it seems like it's paralyzed us more than leakage. I think it's blockage.
Yeah, so what I took, my takeaway is on this video is that, we've done a lot of stuff, over the years. As our country has become more and more countries become industrialized and stuff, and there's all kinds of other factors, but this climate change is making it just that much more difficult for poverty, low income location countries, and including areas in our country that it seems like we're taking one step forward, but then we're taking 2 steps back.
Okay.
Tim, you have something to say?
Oh, I was just thinking that, I when I saw that bucket with all the water squirting out of it, I thought, I don't know who came up with this metaphor, this analogy, but it was great because, yeah, I mean, that's, and then Dennis went ahead and did a further modification of our bucket.
Yeah, he modified it.
On top. It's all true. And it's a visually very effective symbol.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's also a rusty bucket, and more holes are appearing as countries, or the poorer countries, want to improve themselves. They're doing things to try to equalize their economic and standards, and it's counterproductive. For instance, and I'm not pointing fingers at Brazil particularly, but it's a shining example. The burning of their forests to get farmland. Yeah, they need farmland, but they're destroying something that is invaluable in the whole world. So how do we and they educate and understand this and help them? There's so many problems.
Yeah, I mean, that question of Brazil, I've been in Brazil since 1991. I've been there many times. That question was asked in 1992 in ECO 92, right? It hasn't changed. It's economic, it's political will, it's corporations, if anything.
Right.
And one of the fundraisers that I did, it wasn't associated with Living Water, was it was probably 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, was there was essentially a dam in the interior of the state of Minas Gerais that was essentially holding polluted water from mines, and that leaked into the I think it was the Rio Preto, the Black River, and it essentially killed how many people's livelihoods, along with damaging people's lives, and their towns got totally destroyed, right? So I mean, I don't think it's the people that are there. The political will isn't there. Obviously, they nobody really wants to get into politics or whatever else, but it's corporations that are the ones that are maybe driven by shorter term gains, or even any type of financial gains, versus long-term sustainability. I mean, the Amazon is going to survive. Brazil, they've rebuilt their forest in the Atlantic. They're after using it for coffee, and then one of the Portuguese kings actually said, no, we got to rebuild this beautiful Atlantic rainforest here in the state of Rio de Janeiro. And they did that, right? So that's going to outlive all these corporations. I mean, some of these corporations are maybe 100 years old, right? And they're mining companies, mining and all these types of companies. How long are they going to last versus everything in nature, right? And are we going to be around as human beings to witness that or not?
Yeah, there's a video coming up. I'm trying not to do spoiler alerts, but we talk about the resources and these companies that exploit these resources, and what is it's a ticking clock that's, there's going to be an end game to it. So these places that do have resources to do mining and natural gas and getting oil, they do have, they're the richer countries, but the countries that don't have it, all these oil countries, send oil to countries that don't have it, obviously, pipeline it or put it on ships or whatever the case. So we'll talk here shortly about what are options for these countries that don't have these resources, and where is what political strategy or economic strategies these countries have when they keep it or control and not trying to sell everything at once, or how they allow slow trickle of, if you will, of these resources to other countries to raise the prices as well.
Well, on that topic, Marco, I mean, you touched on a lot of things. Is who has the right answers? Sometimes the people in those countries do have the right answers, right? And since James is the second time he took down Brazil, and it kind of irked me since the last time. In the 70s, when the oil crisis, they actually made alcohol-developed cars from all the sugar cane. We never adapted it here in this country. Our biofuel is based off of big corn, which is totally inefficient, right? Things like algae and sugarcane, all these other types of biofuels are much more efficient. Yet we decided to just fund the big guys that were still producing our corn, right? So it just logically doesn't make any sense how inefficient it is. And we can learn some things from these other countries that are dealing from day to day.
Yeah, absolutely.
How much do we depend upon palm oil in all the products that we have in the United States?
That's globally. So I saw that. I read on that about the palm oil, where Indonesia is just wiping out their forests to build palm oil farms, basically. There's a little bit of the plant, they're plants, but however, they're also killing off all the animals that habitat in that area. So it's once again, it's about greed and and not being not planning for the future, not if we instead of taking the whole land out of the picture, just how about smaller areas, and then building something else to that's renewable resources.
But the palm oil issue is driven by the United States, because we are the ones who decided we can't have trans fats in our food products. And so isn't that when they changed over to palm oil? So
yeah, I mean it's correct, but it's also globally. What I read about that is it's a global issue, and they for whatever reason the climate over there is the best condition for those plants or trees to work or to grow efficiently, but there's just too much. We got to look at what we do in the future, or what we do now. Which things we do today impact the earth negatively in a small way, or even the big way, even a small way. But we also have to look at what is what are alternatives. It's what resources are sustainable and doesn't affect as much. We can't fix it, like I said last time, can't fix it in one day, but we need to start pulling things out that are not as are harmful, but also are not helping the local governments, the local businesses, to make be profitable and increase their economies.
Okay.
Interesting that it's not all just businesses, the major businesses like the oil companies Some of them are bailing out and preparing to bail out of the oil industry and shift over to the electricity and natural clean electricity. I know Shell is one of them. There were several companies that have sold their or are selling their property in the Canadian sand. If you saw the article the other day in the paper, I think it was, I forget where I read it. Anyway, they are trying to be responsible. The trouble is they sell it. It's a small private business that is not regulated as well. And they are really, they're really abusing things so far as keeping it clean, making it safe, and it's a real problem. It's going to have to be government working with the public and with the businesses. I don't know how you control that, especially the way politics are done.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, innovation comes so much from necessity from the military, right? I mean, we be honest with ourselves. The DoD funds so much of our research institutions, and perhaps there are things that come out of that that actually make the world better. I mean, so the internet came from that. The other types of things that are going on, I don't know, in the military, but I mean, obviously electrification is huge. I know there's organizations up here that are working on electrification, and electrification could be, it could be a couple different things. I mean, I hear things about just an innovation. Government does have to innovate is kind of what, James, you're trying to say, is government with private industry has to do it. And maybe that, unfortunately, has maybe positive intentions, but eventually nefarious ones do take over innovations for their own needs and goods reasons.
Yeah, just like, I don't know if anybody here watches Formula One race cars sports, but they also spearheaded the, they're all done by, built by car manufacturers, these cars. And they developed a curve system where when you hit the brakes, you're building electricity into a battery power, and then you can use it to go faster. So stuff like that, there is a lot of, like Cheng said, there's a lot of innovation. Some things, you have to, sometimes it takes an individual, sometimes it takes a business, sometimes it takes governments or a combination to say that, hey, there's a way of doing something better. And as long, the hard part is sometimes trying to get that spark to go and get funding for it, continue to improve that technology. But it's still going to take a lot of, there's still stuff out there that we need to get improved on with newer technology, but it's not, technology is either not there yet or not mature enough. So to be, profitable, like I said before.
Sometimes it takes just plain ordinary citizens to get together. Kalama, which is south of us, they were bringing fracking oil to create methanol in a refinery to send it over to China to make plastics. The people got news of this, and then they forced that to stop. But it's just local people.
Yep.
That's my question. There's 25 of us here or so viewing, and we have a pretty common consensus of some things that need to be done. But what can the 25, or what can I do? What can 25 of us do, or what can be done? I'm a get it done type of guy, but I don't know, what should I be doing to help? Chang, do you have some ideas? What can we do to?
Absolutely.
You've got lots of ideas.
I'm a true person because, this is one of the struggles I have, and I've been praying a lot about for living water ministries. We think about NIMBY, not in my backyard, but water's a problem everywhere, right? I mean, you can do a quick search on the internet. Why not put in low flushing toilets, right? Just in your home, right? Reducing of plastics. I'll share in an email or a link. I was just finding about the Great Pacific Plastic, the patch of plastic that's out there, right? And a lot of people don't think about it. Maybe we think about it a little bit more on the West Coast. It's in the Pacific, even though the Pacific has been totally just destroyed by flyovers and military testing over the years and whatnot. But there's one thing I read that there's a big Pacific or big plastic patch just in Central America, in Panama. And this is so close to this is our backyard, whatever else. And it's like you see these local people and indigenous people that are diving to clean out plastic and everything else because it's getting into their food sources and everything. So I mean, reduction of plastic. A rain barrel. It's an easy thing if you water your plants or whatever else is a rain barrel. I know the city of Seattle, they had and some local municipalities might actually install cisterns or rain barrels for free because essentially once that water gets lost, the ocean takes forever to get back up, right? So our water supply is bad that way. So that planting a tree, buying less stuff, I guess that's the things that we can do, I guess, just locally that make kind of an impact. And I mean, I think the rain barrel thing is fantastic because, I mean, that's an easy source to have, right? And you can just pump it or, spray your plants or whatever else to reduce your water usage. I mean, to me, those are the biggest things along with, just educating and reading a lot of stuff. I mean, I think one of the things that we have really luckily, I grew up in the Chicago area, so I didn't necessarily see it, even though Chicago and where I went to school, the University of Illinois, tout so much about, pride or I guess, honoring the Native Americans, but they really don't have any Native Americans or any traditions there. But here, my kids, they did studies in their elementary schools about cedar and salmon, and a lot of the local Native Americans, they know a lot about this, is that they thrived here. Their art thrived because they had cedar and the salmon. They have plenty of resources that they're blessed with to be able to thrive. So they know how to live symbiotically. And there is some indigenous movements that are going on about how indigenous people know how to deal with wildfires better because they know how to control burns, to how they know how to live symbiotic with the environment. I'm not an expert in that, but there's definitely a movement of that along with indigenous foods that are going on. So to me, it's like we just pay attention to our local environment and in our homes to see how we can be really actors in taking care of our resources.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just I'm actually this past year I did the Sound Salmon Solutions polar bear plunge, and I'm actually doing it again with my sister on this coming Saturday in Mukilteo. You can still sign up for that if you're crazy enough to get into the cold water. But yeah, there's a lot of local organizations out there for to do the small things. Each organization is not going to solve the world, but it's these little pieces that add up and brings attention to the issues that we have that sometimes don't get the attention, or if they do get the attention, it's not clear. The information could be off or whatever the case. But just to keep things moving along, let's go on to the second question of the day. Let me share that screen. So based on that last video we just saw as well, Dr. Katharine Hayhoe uses the example of a camel who is malnourished, underfed, in poor health, and already overloaded. How useful is this image for considering poverty?
Well, I don't like the combination of poverty and hunger to be combined. And I guess sometimes it's a little bit of subtlety, but one of my wife's friends, she did the Peace Corps down in El Salvador, probably coming up on 10 plus years ago. And she wrote these beautiful, eloquent letters of like her experience in El Salvador. And she said, we're just finishing up corn season. We're going to bean season. And she would describe all the different recipes of the food they had there. And she said that El Salvador might be considered the poorest country in the Americas and all, but they're not hungry. And so sometimes we associate hunger with poverty. And in El Salvador, the biggest import is American dollars from people sending it in there. So yes, they live in poverty, they don't have resources, but they're not hungry. At the same time, on this topic here, where climate change is impacting the way that people grow their food, it will spiral them into more poverty. So that's kind of my opinion on that, is that hunger before wealth is more important, right? If they can't be fed because of rising water and their crops and drought are affected, that's more of an impact than getting them and rising them out of economic despair, because they can't even get out of economic despair if they can't even eat.
Yeah. For me, that analogy, you always hear that the straw that broke the camel's back. There, I went to Afghanistan twice, and I saw the one, if not the poorest country in the world, and they're in a desert. The windstorms are horrific, and with windstorms, wind comes from different pressure changes in the atmosphere, and I don't know how they live in their homes, and nothing like what we have at home talking about, but those situations are going to get worse. And what we'll talk about also is about this migration of folks leaving these poorer countries because they just can't live in that environment. The environment is not stable, or it doesn't produce anything. There's no resources, or it gets flooded out. If you're like in those Pacific island countries, or even any lowland countries. But anybody else have anything on what's your thoughts
I might
on?
mention, Marco, I just finished a book called Braiding Sweetgrass, and it was suggested by Bill, and I appreciate that. It is written by a woman that's a biologist, or botanist too, and also she is Native American. And it was just amazing to me what we could learn from other cultures, and the closeness that the Native people have had between animals and plants, and the respect and appreciation of these things. And I thought it was just amazing. And just as Chang was saying, you don't put hunger and poverty in one place. It often is there for both. But if everyone grew a garden, a vegetable garden or whatever, or had a better appreciation of our water and of our animals, you can learn so much from other cultures. And I think we are all of this world. We are the stewards, and we must take care of our world. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Karen.
Karen, what was that book title again?
Braiding Sweetgrass.
Braiding Sweetgrass. Okay, thank you.
It's a lot about plants and such, and also instead of the when children come in for the Pledge of Allegiance, they had a different pledge, which was the appreciation of the earth and receiving, but also giving back.
I think Susie Oversee, during one of our council meetings a year ago or so, or even 2 years ago, but she, I think I remember that Sweetgrass part title. Yeah, that's it.
Oh, there it is.
Oh,
Braiding
yeah.
Sweetgrass. That's she did a devotion on that before our meeting, and it was really nice. I liked it a lot. I need to take a look at that myself.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks. Talking about books, it'd be great to send an email out with other book ideas, because there's a ton of them. I just want to recommend one here that kind of brings it back to kind of Christianity, and actually really to the Abrahamic faiths. I attended a multi-faith lecture down in Seattle, and one of the lecturers was actually a theology professor. He was a rabbi from Seattle University. He helped translate an updated version of a book called The Animals' Lawsuit Against Humanity. And so it's known as a multi-faith story or novel, I guess, that it has to do with, it took place when I think it was a Muslim king had a Christian scholar write this book under him, and it was translated by a rabbi. And essentially it talks about how human beings and the natural world interact. And actually the characters are quite interesting because one of the characters are actually animals. It's a very fun book, and it's also very, I think, timeless, talking about human beings and their responsibilities, and maybe arguably ways human beings can be better with the natural world.
Yeah, one more thing before I start the next video, but I also bought another book on Amazon. This was actually provided to me by Beth Lewis. And I don't know if Beth is over at home with you right now, Rick, but say thank you again. But I haven't read it yet, but it's next on my list, and it's called Speed and Scale: An Action Plan for Solving Our Climate Crisis Now. So just like, people, we've been hearing this on the, I think it was Leo just said that, how do we solve things right now? It's a lot of different ways, and there's different, it's not always the same approach for a local issue versus an issue that's in a different country or something. So there's definitely a lot of resources out there. So I'll provide that link as well during the email or during the when I send out the YouTube video. But let me keep going forward. There's a lot of good discussion, which I'm really happy again how this is all playing out. But let me share my screen again.
Poor people in developing countries need fossil fuels to reach the standard of living we enjoy. It's completely unfair to tell them they can't, right? The number of people on this planet has grown steadily over the last few thousand years, thanks to the optimal climate conditions that allowed us to thrive and expand. But it wasn't until we figured out how to power our lives with coal and then gas and oil that our population really took off exponentially. In 1780, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, there were around 900 million people on this planet. Today, there's more than 7 billion of us. Fossil fuels have powered the technology that's brought us untold benefits. We don't have to walk miles to get our water from the well anymore. It's right here when we turn on the tap, and purified too. We don't have to hunt and gather our food all day, every day, and then worry about it spoiling overnight. We buy it at the grocery store, and then it sits in our fridge for days or even weeks. We used to get around by foot, cart, or horse, but now we have cars, trains, and airplanes that whiz us around town and across the world at what would have seemed like incredible speeds to our great-grandparents. We don't have to go to bed at sunset and rise at dawn anymore either. Electricity gives us light and much more anytime we want it. And modern medicine, that might be the biggest advance of all. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure I'd be dead by now if I were living in the conditions we had before the Industrial Revolution. There's no question that fossil fuels have benefited us enormously. They've allowed us to enjoy so many of the modern conveniences we have today. So it makes sense to say, don't poor countries need fossil fuels too? Aren't fossil fuels their ticket out of grinding poverty and hunger and disease, just like they were for us? Now, just to be clear, no one is saying they can't use fossil fuels. Every country was allowed to design their own contribution to the global potluck that is the Paris Agreement. But even still, fossil fuels aren't the answer for most countries that are looking to raise their standard of living. And here's 5 reasons why. Reason number 1. With a few exceptions, most developing countries don't actually have a lot of fossil fuels of their own. And what we do have is finite anyways. According to the BP Statistical Review of World Energy, if we keep on using energy at the current rate, we have about 50 years worth of oil and natural gas left, and about 150 years of coal. That's it. And of the world's remaining reserves, it's estimated that about 37% are in North America, about 20% each in Europe and the Middle East, 14% in Latin America, mostly Venezuela and Brazil, and that means that the remaining 10% or so of those reserves are all that's left for the rest of the world, including most of Africa and Southeast Asia. So when we say to poor countries, you should use fossil fuels to develop the same as we did, we're essentially saying, let us help you become dependent on the same energy sources we use that are finite, and oh, you don't have them anyways, so you have to buy them from us. That doesn't sound quite so altruistic anymore, does it? Here's reason number 2. Fossil fuels widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots. In developing countries that do have fossil fuel resources, kleptocrats often make off with most of the money, leaving the masses in poverty. In Venezuela, for example, it's estimated that the state oil company paid out $11 billion worth of fraudulent contracts from 2004 to 2014. In Nigeria, it was recently revealed that Shell paid over $1 billion for oil rights that the oil minister turned around and awarded to his own company. In Brazil, an enormous new oil deposit was discovered off the coast of Rio de Janeiro in 2006. Part of the argument for developing this resource were the funds that it would provide for educational and social programs. Yet these funds never materialized. Instead, over $2 billion was funneled to Petrobras executives and government officials. And this leads right into reason number 3, the devastated landscape that fossil fuel extraction often leaves behind. We're all familiar with the horrifying images from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Yet imagine if that happened in a country that lacked the resources to clean it up. Idoho advocates on behalf of children in Nigeria. In a report detailing the environmental impacts of oil and gas extraction in one Nigerian province, he said, "Oftentimes, residents of various oil-producing communities in Nigeria live in agonizing conditions, economically and socially, arising from years of neglect and deprivations and severe environmental degradations caused by the production activities of most oil and gas companies in the area." Even here in the United States, we're affected. Mountaintop removal coal mining can poison local water supplies. Research shows that people who live in mining areas are at greater risk of cancer, heart disease, birth defects, and chronic illnesses. Then there's reason number 4, air pollution. Burning coal, gas, and oil is responsible for an estimated 2.5 million deaths per year around the world, 200,000 of those in the United States alone. Who are these people suffering from lung disease and asthma and other related conditions? Often, they're those who can't afford to live in a cleaner neighborhood with better air quality, as well as children, the elderly, and those who are already sick or infirm. What's the 5th and last reason why fossil fuels won't solve the world's problems? You probably guessed it, climate change. Burning fossil fuels produces carbon dioxide, a powerful heat-trapping gas. Carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuels are the #1 reason why global temperatures are rising today. Why does this matter to poor countries? Because the suffering that global warming will cause to our resources, our welfare, and our economies is not going to be parceled out equally. As temperature increases, global GDP is likely to drop. One study forecasted possible decreases of over 20% by 2100. So today, global GDP stands at around $80 trillion per year. Let that number sink in. That is $80 trillion per year. Compare 20% of that, $16 trillion, with the estimated cost of meeting the Paris Agreement worldwide, between 40 to 175 billion per year, or just 0.005 to 0.2% of global GDP. And the global south will bear the brunt of the economic losses caused by climate change, with the poorest 40% of countries estimated to experience a 75% drop in their average income. Any of these reasons alone should be enough to convince us that encouraging poor countries to develop an addiction to the very same energy sources that are responsible for climate change is a bad idea. Poor people the world over are already suffering disproportionately due to climate change today, but they still need energy. Access to energy is essential to our health, our quality of life, and our well-being. So that's why I'm so excited by the stories that I'm hearing these days. How pay-as-you-go solar may revolutionize areas of Africa with no electricity grid at all. How India is introducing new trains with rooftop solar panels to provide the power for the coaches. And how Costa Rica got a full 98.1% of its electricity in 2016 from renewable sources, including hydropower, solar, and wind. So let's turn our attention to helping the developing world leapfrog over coal and oil and gas to adopt these inspiring new technologies, rather than expecting them to do it the same old way we did 200 years ago.
All right, so our next question, based on the video you just saw from Dr. Katharine Hayhoe, we often think of climate change as a distant issue that affects polar bears or future generations, but it is here now, affecting us in ways that matter to all of us. How are we being affected by climate change within the US? And what infrastructure do we have in place to protect us from extreme weather events?
So as someone who enjoys strapping boards on his feet and sliding around, if you ski around here, you know that our temperatures in the mountains hover around freezing a lot. And often it can be raining up there. Well, just a few degrees makes a big difference in the snow conditions up there. And those few degrees also make a big difference in how much snowpack we have up there, which in turn affects how much water we have. And that happens all around the world. If there's just a small change in temperature, you don't get the snow in the mountains sticking, and then you have empty reservoirs. And we are affected by that today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially this past winter when, I was stuck in home. I didn't really go anywhere during when we had all that snow, but to hear on the news, how very small changes can affect, ski conditions. And even folks that wanted to go skiing, now the passes are blocked with too much snow. So it's not, ideal for anybody right now. Anybody else have an example? Ed, you got a question or a statement?
When I was growing up in New York, there was a dump that was nearby where we lived. And we would often say, oh, the Arlington dump is on fire again. And the aroma of that came into our air, into our homes. And I'm noticing that there are a lot of places where we dump our used junk, our food and everything else into the dumps. And there are people there trying to get something out of the dumps. And even I know that our present garbage people must have some place where they dump it, and it affects the health of the people nearby.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
This is a response to Pastor Kuhn's, Reverend Kuhn's comment, but we were recently, I think it was last summer, Jackie had this crazy idea to visit Bickleton, this little tiny town in eastern Washington, the bluebird capital of Washington. And I reluctantly went along with it. It was actually wonderful. There were like 75 people in the whole town, but it was really cute. And there were bluebirds there and all these bluebird houses. As we left Bickleton, we decided to go down to the Columbia River. And all of a sudden, I discovered there was this road next to the public road. And on that road, there were nothing but garbage trucks. And at the bottom, there was a garbage train. And I saw the words Rabanco, and I realized that where they were going, that the garbage trucks just went up the hill and there was a big landfill there. And I realized that was my garbage that I was driving past on its way to being dumped in, what many people consider the middle of nowhere, but somebody else considers their backyard. It was interesting. But the reason I raised my hand was I keep thinking, I've heard this, that woman, I like what she had to say. And I keep thinking, there are many people who are working on methods to provide alternate energy systems. At the same time, we are doing a tremendous amount to subsidize fossil fuel production.
Yeah.
If we could get our heads straight and figure out a way to subsidize the development and application of these alternate energy systems in third world countries, then they could see the benefits of them. They could benefit from them directly as we sort of experiment and improve them. I understand that in Africa, she mentioned the solar panels and the on demand sort of thing. I've also read that people have cell phones, but they don't have landlines because it makes more sense. You don't have to build all that infrastructure. That's a great idea, a great experiment. So they just build the cell towers. What if we could say, okay, your company is working on some new solar panels. We'll pay you to go down to this country where they are in desperate need of energy, and we pay you to, do your test pilot project there with the cooperation of the people that live there, of course. And both sides would benefit. A win for them and a win for the people who are trying to develop new power sources and new methods.
To help poor people, one of the things that our nation and anybody can do is there's the concept called value added. And what we do a lot is, say, for example, chocolate. The beans are grown in tropical areas, and then the beans are harvested and they're sent elsewhere for processing. But if the beans were kept there and value added to those beans by processing them into chocolate or cocoa powder, that the people in those areas would benefit from the economy that provides for them. So when you buy things, try to buy, what's that called? When you buy products that have been assisted.
Fair trade?
Fair trade, exactly, fair trade. And so when you talk about building solar panels or things somewhere else, think about, they need to consider, are the resources there? Can they take their own resources? Can they add value to those resources and do better for themselves economically? So we have been exploiting resources from other countries for hundreds of years. We were exploited. That's why we threw the tea overboard. Okay, that was a corporate exploitation, and so we need to consider those things as well.
I think those are valid points, but all that is happening. I work with an Indian company that's building solar power plants around India. Because there's business that goes on in those places. And, I think we forget how cheap we have oil in this country, right? you talk to anybody else, $40 a gallon for gas. How much do we pay? It's so well subsidized. So we're, I think, a little bit naively thinking that, just fossil fuels or whatever, because it's so cheap everywhere. But everyone has had to come up with other ideas of generating energy, whatever else, along with businesses working that way. Just a matter of, I think, when we think about import and export, if one of the biggest ways to reduce carbon footprints, whatever else, is just transport, right? Why do we have to build it somewhere and move it elsewhere, right? You think about the shortage of microchips or just shortage of supply chain right now is manufacturers coming back to this country. And if that reduces some, some carbon footprint, then that's better, right? It's like you're buying locally or whatnot, even though they say that ocean transport is one of the cheapest ways to transport things than rail or whatever else in this country. So I think that's a good thing is seeing and building with what we have here, and really with the internet, there's no reason why that technology can't be transferred anywhere, plans, blueprints to ideas, and they figure out what they have locally to actually manufacture or assemble it together. It was just like, I think a lot of these initiatives, I think they're sometimes called social enterprises or even the nonprofits that try and transport ideas. They designed something, some talk was around 3D printing, other was around utilizing certain resources, and they would send the really expensive parts of a bicycle, like some of the gears, but the whole frame itself would be built locally in bamboo because that was a local resource there. So a combination of using technology to reduce, I think, transports of goods, and especially the big heavy goods, I think is a way of sharing and improving people's lives everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some,
Oh, go ahead.
Marco?
Yep.
Yeah, something everybody can do tomorrow is call PUD, like our daughter did.
Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, what
There
happened?
you go. There you go.
Yeah. Okay. So what you can do tomorrow is call PUD. Our daughter started working with the PUD about 3 months ago, and she now has 22 solar panels on the roof. And they are installing the meters, takes 2 meters, and it's going to save a lot of energy if all of us just put solar panels right now on our own roofs. And then we can also begin to take resources to other areas, like my niece. It affects real estate hugely, the climate change. My niece bought a beautiful brick house when she moved from Austin, Texas to Victoria, which is right on the coast and gets all the hurricanes. And that's why it was a cheap house. So it affects every aspect of our lives. But if you call PUD tomorrow, you can get in line to get your solar panels. There, Lee, that's something to do.
Well, that reminds me, am I muted?
No, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, so it reminded me of what I've heard that's gone on in Germany, and this has been going on for decades now, I believe, is they got rid of a good number, if not all, of their coal plants. Now, I know they're still using gas in other ways, but what they did is they passed legislation that required the state, what would be our state chartered banks, to give zero interest loans to incentivize people to install solar panels on their roof. And then they set up the grid so that any excess electricity that they generated went back into the power grid.
Yeah.
And what was good about that is that there was something in it for people, both for themselves and for their community, and it just took off like wildfire.
Yes.
So if you design a program that's where it's mutually beneficial and you promote it, I don't think people have a big problem with solar. I mean, I think most of us would say that makes sense. I just had a $600 bill for energy at our house for over a month and a half period. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
I don't think Christina's paid anything.
yeah. Anyway, so I'm just saying that we have some responsibility to come up with creative ideas. We can't rely on the government, which is us actually, to do it independent of us. And so I think if a group like this continues to talk and meet, then maybe we could have some influence outside of our own, little group.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we're having this class, is to spark that conversation and keep it going forward. Don't, all these classes that we've done in the past year and a half or so, as a church, we haven't just dropped the ball. We're still talking about it. That's the thing we gotta keep doing, is talk about, what's going on with climate change and how it affects climate justice. So we're at 11:46 right now, but I still have one more video, and we have a lot. I really appreciate this engaging conversation. Stuff we're going to talk about in the next few weeks. Kind of, you guys kind of touched on those subjects, but let me show you one more video and one more question, and then we got to be done by noon if possible. But let me share my screen one more time.
Your neighbour is thirsty, but there is a solution, and there is hope. For many people in the north of Ethiopia, the impact of climate change is devastating. They used to expect rain up to 4 months a year, but now it only falls in August. People don't have enough water to survive. It is an issue of life or death. And for families like Orbisa's, everyday life is a real struggle.
My name is Obisa and I have 9 children. Life is very challenging here. We have no food and are dependent on our livestock for our livelihood. Whenever there is no rainfall, our animals die as there is no grass or water. This affects our lives significantly. We will not get money or have milk to drink. We have no other option. When it rains, I only need to walk 5 minutes to collect water. But these water sources are now dry. Every night, I walk for 10 hours to collect water from a lake. The walk is dangerous. I can face wild animals such as hyenas and leopards. The water I collect is not sufficient. I am only able to collect less than half of what my family needs each day. We need most of it for drinking, but sometimes it is not enough, and my family has to go to bed thirsty. I feel extremely sad whenever I cannot provide water for my children. It hasn't rained for 6 months, and I don't know when it will rain next. It is God who knows when the rainfall will come. I worry about my children and my family. I worry about the small livestock which are remaining. I feel worried whenever I think about the future. If we could get water access in our village, this would change things for me. This is the first and most important thing that would give me hope.
Orbisa's story is sadly all too common. Forced to find any kind of water, more people are getting sick, and their livestock, their only source of income, are dying due to lack of water. Because of climate change, the area has become even more dry and arid, like a desert. People are suffering, and many are giving up hope. But there is good news. Tear Fund is changing lives by working with local partners to set up solar-powered wells that will provide clean water closer to communities. This will help to restore hope and give new life for all who live there.
In the last 10 years, droughts are increasing from year to year. Availability of water is very, very difficult. Tear Fund has started now working with FSA, saving lives by creating access to potable water, drilling boreholes and developing water supply systems. The greatest joy and happiness we could see in communities is when they get water. Lives are being changed and they are seeing the love of Jesus. When we provide water for these communities, we are changing the lives of the coming generations too. The young people, the children, their lives will change definitely when we provide water for them.
All right, so that was our last video for today, and then our question based on this last video. Climate change is not only an environmental issue. Climate change is a poverty issue. It's a hunger issue. Kind of split that up before we just talked about that. It's an issue of inequality and injustice. It's a human issue, and that's why we care. Is this how you think of climate change, or have you seen it more as an environmental issue?
Well, I think people are part of the environment. So, separating it like that, I don't see that because we are part of the environment. So yeah, it's definitely both.
What have you guys seen, friends, relatives, whatever? How do you think other people think about it? When you hear, this was obviously a sad story, but came to a positive ending with the with the solar farm and then and building a well so that they could get water in that dry environment. But how do they, if you're looking at it from a distance, do they think it's, their fault, or people think it's a climate change issue or it's an environmental issue? I just want to spur that conversation. It's like, I think we're all on the same sheet of music, but I'm just curious what other people would think.
Well, what, Michael, are you saying is the difference between climate change and environmental?
Yeah, so we're kind of, maybe I should have said climate justice more. I was just following their questions, pre-made questions, but to me, I guess it's more like a climate justice issue. So, if the industrialized countries are causing most of this greenhouse gases that we talked about, but these countries that don't have all these resources, their own resources, for your coal burning electric plants or anything like that. But if you had these, I don't know, it's hard for me to say, but it's like a feeling, do we think that this is an issue where is, you can separate?
I like the question quite a bit, because it made me think about when people say climate change, they think about it economically, and you see a picture of Miami Beach and condos, and it just goes to show how much our society have undervalued humans compared to things. And it really made me think that way, and it kind of is frustrating, but also maybe cynical.
Yeah, it's all. Oh, go ahead, Dennis.
I was just
watching the hands.
I was just thinking about sort of the filters we run things through when we try to identify social justice problems and how they might be related to climate change. And I think of what's going on our border, and what you have down there are thousands and thousands of refugees who are fleeing their homes because they can't live there. And so those videos really, brought that home. But half the country wants to say that we're being invaded. And so they see it as a threat to democracy or a threat to the United States. And so I think part of our job is to make sure that we're educating people as to what's causing some of these problems, and how I think most people would prefer to stay in their own country, or they're not be forced to leave anyway. And that's how desperate it is. And this mass migration is one of the first signs of global climate problems. And we can either embrace it and try to do something about it, or we can reframe it as something that's an enemy to us.
Good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, did you have something to say?
Bill.
Or Bill did?
No, I don't have anything.
I was just arranging my mute.
Oh, okay. Jim.
There is history. You look, and the time science and successes of countries have been at their best is in times of war, because there was a necessity to get in and learn and get an advantage over your enemy. That's a bad example, yes, but it's true if you look at history. Right now, we're in a war that has nothing to do with the power. Well, it does indirectly, but the power of other countries, but it's also the power of our own greed. And we are wanting to get an advantage over someone else or other things so that we have more, which we don't really need. And all this is going on in a bigger and growing way. And that is what is happening in the world today. You can say, and I think we've had proof today, that the carbon from natural fossil fuels and everything is causing most of the problems. So that's got to change. There is this war going on, and science is going to be our best bet. They are learning how to adjust. There's been a major breakthrough. I think I said this before to some of you. Lithium-ion batteries were a big change. That's not the answer. They had some problems with heating and everything else exploding. They've overcome a lot of that. Now they just recently, just a couple of months ago, they succeeded in making a solid state battery lithium metal. It is lighter, it charges faster, it stores way longer, and it's really good. It's going to be the future of getting electricity all around the world, I think. Musk has been doing a lot. When Australia lost the southern part of the continent's power grid, he offered to build batteries and a superstructure to build their grid back up. I don't think they took it, but they are working on that themselves now. He also offered it to Puerto Rico. I don't know if Puerto Rico was even able to make that decision or not. There's a Eastern Europe country that had a situation like that. But he is one of the leaders in developing storage batteries, not only for the cars that he's building, the planes that are going to be flying, the trucks that are going to be using it, but in the homes. Also, in all the factories, in all the cities and everything, storage batteries is going to be a huge thing.
But I have a question about batteries.
Yeah.
Don't batteries need rare earth minerals? And isn't that just another
some do.
Earth source that we're going to have to deal with in the future?
That's the advantage of this metal one. It's not going to be going over to Africa, to the Congo or Kenya, whatever it is, I forget, and making the kids mine the stuff that's poisoning them. That was more the lithium ion that was doing that.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's fantastic.
Really coming a long ways. They're going to save us.
Yeah. Chris,
Has anybody learned about the clean nuclear energy or the safer nuclear energy that Bill Gates is working on? My nephew works for him in that project, and they have got to the point where they have this technology figured out, and they got funding to actually build their first plant. So I've always been very skeptical and concerned about nuclear power, but this sounds like it actually might be what's going to save us.
Again, stepping forward.
Just a quick comment.
Yeah.
Marco, and I know you're trying to probably.
I'm trying to close everybody out and go.
Yes, I'm sure. One of the things, and everybody knows that I come from an educational background, along with many others in the screen, that we need to take a look at it as a long-term solution. Get this issue into our schools, get it to the young people, because it's those people that those lives are going to be tremendously affected in the future. And we've got to develop curriculum in the sciences and even historically in history and some of those classes that really approach this whole area of climate change, and that we've got to make sure that the kids understand what they're facing. And
The kids are ahead of us.
and that one key example to us in our generation is we were put in our curriculum in health, for example, tobacco and smoking was really unsafe and a bad thing for us to live with. And many of us today do not smoke because it was part of a year and year after curriculum in health that says smoking is bad for you. And so I think you can take that example and make climate change a key subject in our schools.
I think in many ways the youth are kind of already there. I know at least for my children, they're terrified about the future. They are, you know, they're at the point where our generation, the 70s, said, "Oh, can we bring children into the world? It's all messed up." That's where my kids are now. So I think you're right. We need to get that into the curriculum, but I think most young people are way ahead of us.
Yeah, thanks, Carla. If there's, you know, so yeah, that's why I'm doing 7 weeks on this topic, because I know there's so much more to talk about. But it's just past noon right now, so let's close in prayer. If you have anything else you want to talk about, or something that popped in your mind during the week, you know, go ahead and email the group, the same distribution list when I send in notification or Zoom meeting notifications. But yeah, just this is we can talk this all day long, but let's bow our heads in prayer right now. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you for this day. Thank you for everything you've given us. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for giving us opportunity, even in this times of COVID, that we can still talk about what's important for us, what we were called to do, to be stewards of your beautiful planet that you created. As we all are struggling with some of these topics, and that we not just poverty, but on climate justice, and in a future classes that we're going to have, give us the wisdom to do what's right for, you know, for your benefit, for your creation. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Marco.
All right. Thank you guys for showing up and appreciating the dialogues.
See you later.
What's
All right.
Tim? What's you doing?
All right. Good night or good day.